talking reminds me of many, many memories that we have built together. I think this relation is so powerful that helps us to build together not only memories, not only our own understanding, but also it becomes part of your identity. Sometimes I think about the different world that we live in. You know, in the past, for the most part, it seems that for people to understand what's their identity, they more relied on what they are not, instead of understanding what they are. So for example, if Muslims and Christians lived in one town, or if Sunni and Shia Muslim lived in one town, or if Catholic and Protestants lived, for example, in Northern Ireland, maybe it was difficult to say, what does it mean to be a Muslim? It was easier to say, you are not a Christian. Don't mix with them. Don't be friends with them. Then you will be a Muslim. Or Sunni Shia the same, or maybe Catholic Protestant the same. So this type of understanding of identity that we have built, maybe unconsciously, and sometimes maybe consciously, is very, very unproductive. This is the minimum I can say. It's very unproductive, especially today. Today we live in a world in which we have lots of cross-cultural, cross-religious relations. In the same office, in the same classroom, in the same neighborhood, we live together. And today you cannot say, my identity as a Muslim is what I am not. This exclusive and fragile understanding is very, very dangerous, and it will lead to one of the two things. Either you become an extremist, someone wants to exclude others, or you will say goodbye to the whole idea of faith, because you cannot keep this fragile understanding and be an active, productive member of a very mixed society. So we have to come up with a new understanding of identity, and that is what I am, what values I adhere to, and what understanding I should have of others, and how I can accommodate them in my identity. I think this is a very important question. So for me as a Muslim, it's very important to know what my Islam tells me and gives me as tools to accommodate others. It's very important. So, to make it very simple, what I have been doing these years is now almost 20 years that I am actively, following this, and I always try to have both practice of interfaith, visits, talking, but also reflections, because I try not to do anything without reflection. Before what I do and afterwards, to understand what implications this has, what God wants to tell me, if any, in these relations. Always you have to be open. So, thanks to God, now I have come to a better position to understand what is the plan of God for humanity. Now when I read the Quran, and I'm not the only person, but for me it's like my own discovery, although maybe this is said by many other people much before me. The beauty is that you can yourself go and find it by yourself. That God actually has not sent different religions. We don't have different religions. We have made one religion into different religions. And sometimes even we have not been able to recognize the diversity within one of those things that we call religion, and we have excommunicated others. We have said, if you don't follow this tradition of Islam, you are not a Muslim. If you don't follow this tradition of Christianity, you are not a Christian. So, this is quite opposite to the plan of God. The Quran tells us, كَانَ النَّاسُ أُمَّةً وَاحِدًا. In the beginning, people were all one united nation. Gradually, when life became more complicated, they had different answers, and they didn't know how to work together, they were divided. فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ النَّبِيِّينَ. Then God sent the prophets to unite people. But the sad reality is, the prophets bring unity, but then people are divided about the message of the prophets. So they save them from one conflict, but they learn quickly how to fight over what that unifying message was. And this is the whole history of humanity. Soon, after having a community of faith dedicated to a message, they start fighting. And sometimes it reaches to the point that they don't believe that the other person, the other group also have perhaps some share. No. You are not believers in Jesus, you are not believers in Islam. And sometimes even reach killing each other. This is very sad. How God tries to unite us, and we learn how to divide quickly. The Quran tells us that any attempt to divide people is satanic attempt. No matter who is doing this, what name is given. Dividing people, whether it be dividing between husband and wife, between parents and children, dividing inside the community, dividing people of different faith. Any division is caused by ignorance and is a kind of plan, it's a plan for Satan. And one of the things that we find in Islamic traditions is that any word, any attempt to divide people is considered as great sin. On the other hand, to bring people closer, to reconcile, even if you can reconcile two people, is very, very important. Our first Imam Ali, when he was dying, he made some advice as his will. One of the things he said was, Allah fi islahi dhati baynakum. Remember God in bringing reconciliation between two people. Because I heard from Prophet Muhammad that bringing peace between two people is better than 1 year of prayer and fasting. Now you can imagine, if you can bring two families, two tribes, two communities, two nations together, what happens? If just bringing two people together is so important, what about people who work for bringing Muslims and Christians together? So, it's very important that we learn, in whatever capacity that we can function, be a voice for unity. And unity is not to become the same. You may remain different. Of course, I don't celebrate differences, and I don't say, try to add to the differences, but differences are differences. Maybe we can have discussion to come to some agreement, maybe the differences remain. But what is important is no differences should be taken as an excuse to boycott each other, to not communicate to each other, not to recognize the same humanity that God has given all of us. So we have to understand that despite the differences and diversity, we can be together. The Quran tells us that God has created us from one father and mother. Ya ayyuhan nas inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. So not only our Creator is the same, which was enough to be united, but we have also the same father and mother. So the same God and the same father and mother. So we have more than one reason to feel that we are one family. But then God made us into different nations. ثُمَّ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ. In another place it says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ اخْتِلَافُ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُمْ. We have different colors, different languages. Unfortunately, we thought, even some of great philosophers, some of great Greek philosophers that we all know, they try to justify slavery based on the physical differences. And say some races are more strong for taking physical job, and some are more clever. And they try to justify slavery by difference of color or race. But the Quran says something quite opposite. God has made us different لِتَعَارَفُوا, so that you can know each other better and identify each other and relate to each other better. God has made a beautiful mosaic, different colors. But now these colors, unfortunately, without understanding what role they have, they fight with each other. I'm a better color than you, and I want this mosaic all be the same color as mine. And this is quite opposite to the philosophy of creation. God creates multiplicity, but with one pattern. We don't understand that one pattern in multiplicity. And either we fight against that multiplicity or against that one pattern. So, I have been thinking a lot about these issues. And only one point that I can mention, because time is very limited, is that I think although all human beings are people of God and are honored by God, there is no doubt about it. لَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We have created children of Adam and honored them. But I think there is a historical role that Christians and Muslims have to play together. All people should be playing a role. But there is something that Muslims and Christians have to do together. And I have several reasons to convince myself that this is the mission that I have actively participated. It's not just the fact that Muslims and Christians together are more than half population of the world. It's much more than that. When I read the Quran, when I read our hadith about the end of time, when I reflect on so many hadiths narrated by Muslims from different schools of Islam about coming of Jesus and Imam Mahdi and working together and establishing universal peace and justice and equity, I think there are lots of implications for what I have to do today. I cannot ignore my Christian brothers and sisters and expect one day Jesus comes and Imam Mahdi comes and they bring all people together. If we don't work and move in that direction, that's going to be delayed and delayed. Because if people are not ready, just seeing two leaders together will not unite them. And indeed they may question those leaders and say, who said you are true Jesus? We always thought Jesus gives a special privilege to Christians. And who said you are Imam Mahdi? We thought Imam Mahdi gives a special privilege to Muslims or Shia. When people are not ready, they question the Savior, they question the divine leaders. We have to work together to prepare for that beautiful unity, which would then lead all humanity to one united humanity. And I think different prophets have come, they spoke different languages, we have different scriptures, but in the end of time, I don't think we would have one school for Prophet Muhammad, one school for Jesus, one school for Moses, one school for Abraham. No. I think in end of time we would have one school, and that is the school of God. And all these great teachers and leaders, they will be working together under one united authority, and that is God. We have come from God, but we have been separated. Now we have to find back our way towards God. There can be different paths, but we should not forget that the ultimate end is to get closer to God. Sometimes our paths become more important than the destination. And this is sad. Sometimes, we discuss so much about what is the best way of submitting myself to God, worshiping God, doing good things for God, and we forget, do we have that submission in our heart? How to do as an act of submission is very important, but that's secondary. I may be praying and fasting and going to Mecca and do all things for years, but not be a sincere person. Not really submissive to God. Because I have spent my energy on what are the acts and signs of submission, but not the submission itself. If we are really submissive to God, and we want to fulfill His will, then we should not be at all important. Me as a person, or me as a nation, or as a community, we should not claim any form of deity, any form of being the principal. God is the only thing that we should move forward towards Him, and I think God is the one that can unite all of us. Believers in God, and even those who are not believers in God, it's God that can unite us. And it's only under God that all differences become insignificant. But you just need to rise towards God. Sometimes what happens, instead of we rising towards God, we bring God down, we make it God of one tribe, one sect, one race. And there can be lots of harms coming from a tribal God, a sectarian God, a religious God. This is not a real God. This is God in whose mouth I express my ego. It's very dangerous. We have to rise and empty ourselves from our ego so that we can be understanding the will of God and be prepared to just serve what is the will of God and serve our brothers and sisters in humanity. So I hope we, as all human beings, but especially Muslims and Christians, understand that we